What's up, everybody? You survived the AP Gov exam, which my students and the internet tells me was very easy, and now I'm going to give you the answers to the 2023 FRQs. First thing to point out is that there were two versions of the AP exam, and for my very basic research, it sounds like set 1 was given to the West Coast and set 2 to the East Coast. Without any further ado, here are this year's FRQs and my answer keys for them. Keep in mind there could be additional right answers. Let's start with set 1. First up, the concept application. For part A, the scenario focuses on Kennedy's speech, so I'm going with bully pulpit and persuasion for this one. Some books call this going public, so that's probably an option too. Your answer has to describe it and has to be in the context of the scenario. For part B, I'd say the speech could have increased the popularity of the space program and moon mission, which could potentially decrease the ability of Congress to perform effective oversight. It could be tougher for them to hold NASA accountable, restrict their discretionary authority, or reduce their budget if everybody's excited about going to the moon. For part C, I have two opposite answers. If NASA believed other goals were more important than the moon mission, they could have slowed down implementation of Kennedy's agenda by using their discretion to focus on other things. They could use their expertise to place obstacles in the way and explain why Kennedy's agenda wasn't feasible. Or they could have supported his agenda and used that presidential support and public opinion boost to get larger budgets from Congress, increasing their ability to land a man on the moon within the decade like Kennedy wanted. Next, the quantitative analysis. Part A is simple. Donating money to a campaign saw the biggest rise from 2018 to 2020. Part B asks about the difference in participation between midterm and presidential elections, and the answer is that participation is consistently higher in all categories in presidential than midterm elections. Part C asks you to draw a conclusion about the role of linkage institutions. Media focusing more on presidential elections could lead to more people participating in presidential elections since they view them as more important. Parties raise more money and advertise more, which could also lead to the same result. Same with interest groups. Lastly, Part D asks about political efficacy. Show them that you know that political efficacy is the belief that a person can affect politics, and then explain that some of these actions require more political efficacy than others. It doesn't take much to vote or to encourage your friends to vote, but you gotta have a high level of political efficacy to volunteer for a campaign or spend your day registering people to vote. Next, the core comparison features a case about Jehovah's Witnesses. Part A, the clause common to both cases, is the free exercise clause. Part B has 2 points. The first point is for giving the facts of Yoder. Then the second point is for showing how those facts led to similar decisions in both cases. Both cases ruled in favor of the freedom for people to practice their religion via the free exercise clause, and held that states couldn't deny Jehovah's Witnesses the right to preach, nor could it deny the Amish the right to homeschool their children. Part C asks about balancing governmental power with individual rights. Governments often have the power to require people to obtain permission to do certain things, and the court usually defers to that power. But in this case, something more fundamental, namely the right of people to freely practice their religion, is more important than government's ability to require permits for mundane activities. Lastly, the argument essay is a classic argument essay topic. I think one of the practice FRQs in the Ultimate Review Packet is basically this topic. Pause the video if you want to see a few ideas of pieces of evidence from documents, keeping in mind that there's lots of other right answers. Okay, next up, set 2. FRQ 1 was all about recall elections. Part A is retrospective voting, voting based on the recent past and the incumbent. Part B asks about the media's role in the election outcome, where the media likely reported so much on the problems in the state that it was fresh in people's minds and led to many retrospective voters voting for recall because they were very aware of how unhappy they were with the governor's performance. Part C is basically testing if you know the impeachment process. The more specific, the better. The House impeaches with a majority vote. The Senate holds the impeachment trial and needs a 2/3 vote to convict and remove the president from office. Okay, FRQ 2. Part A is the silent generation. Part B asks for a trend. Younger generations are becoming a larger percentage of eligible voters over time, while older generations are becoming a smaller portion of eligible voters. Part C says to draw a conclusion about how this could affect a 2032 presidential candidate's strategy for mobilizing voters. Candidates could use more social media and online resources geared towards younger voters, since millennials and Gen Z will be over half the electorate by then, and both are very tech savvy. Part D asks about life cycle effects. People tend to focus on different issues at different stages of life and are often more socially liberal when they're young and focus more on security as they age. In 2036, over a third of the electorate will be under 40, so candidates might focus on more socially liberal policies. Then again, this one's tricky because both Gen Z and millennials are getting older. So with life cycle effects, it's possible that they won't be as liberal in 13 years as they are today. So maybe an answer about focusing on issues relevant to middle-aged people might work. Alright, FRQ 3. Part A is the Establishment Clause. Easy peasy. Part B, first point is for the facts of Engel. Second point is for showing the difference between the two cases. In Engel, the government policy promoted religious activity, whereas in Zellman, parents were free to choose public or private religious schools. So the government policy was neutral towards religion. Part C seems oddly obvious because states that liked the ruling would just copy the Cleveland Law. They could establish school vouchers that could be used at both public and private religious schools. I don't think you'd need this, but it's also true that increased spending on vouchers could potentially decrease spending on public schools. Last is the argument essay. Kind of a weird prompt comparing checks and balances and social movements and asking which one better ensures the people's will is represented. So I guess we're assuming that there is such a thing as the will of the people, but I digress. Pause the video if you'd like to see a few ideas for evidence. Again, keep in mind that there are lots of other right ways to do this. And that, my friends, is it. I want to thank you so much for supporting my channel, and I truly hope that my videos helped you feel confident on exam day. Make sure to come back in July and tell me about all those great AP scores you got. One last time, try not to cry. This has been a La Money production.